You'd think that by now, people would have learned not to mess with my family, especially not in a place like this. See, this isn't your average suburban street, where HOA Karens lurk behind their blinds counting your trash cans or measuring how long your car's been parked in the driveway. No, this story takes place at our lake cabin, a private slice of peace we'd owned for generations. And trust me, when someone dares to pull HOA nonsense in the woods, you know you're dealing with a whole new level of entitled crazy. But let me back up. This all started with my daughter, Ellie. She's 27, fierce, independent, and inherited more of my stubborn streak than I probably should have passed down. Ellie grew up splitting her summers between our home in the suburbs and the lake property. Over the years, that place became part of who she was. While other kids were learning TikTok dances, she was learning how to repair dock posts, fish without getting her line tangled, and negotiate with grumpy contractors twice her age. By the time she turned 20, she could run the cabin's maintenance blindfolded, which is why, when I got too busy with work last year, she took over the keys for the season. This cabin wasn't some crumbling shack we lucked into, either. It was a proper piece of land. 5 acres of private shoreline, 2 docks, a boathouse, and a main cabin built like a fortress from the 70s. We had the deed framed back home, a copy stored in a fireproof safe, and every square foot marked on the county's official property maps. In short, ours. Undisputed, unshakable, or so we thought. The trouble started the same week Ellie drove up alone to open the place for the summer. It wasn't even 48 hours before she called me sounding somewhere between baffled and furious. "Dad, some woman just told me I can't park by the dock." "What woman?" "She says she's from the HOA." "What HOA?" "Exactly." Turns out a new lakeside community had popped up about half a mile down the road. One of those slap-together developments where they bulldoze nature, jam up a bunch of cookie-cutter vacation homes, and slap a big shiny sign out front boasting private lake access, residents only. Their idea of community wasn't about neighbors. It was about control. And sitting at the top of their self-appointed food chain was Linda. Of course her name was Linda. Middle-aged, sunburned, armed with a clipboard and a permanent squint of suspicion. HOA president by day, professional busybody by every other waking moment. According to Ellie, this woman pulled up in a golf cart, because of course she did, and had the nerve to scold her for parking on association grounds. Ellie calmly pointed out that she was literally on our private property. The dock, the lot, the gravel lane, all ours. Bought, paid for, recorded. But Linda waved that off like Ellie was some clueless tourist trying to sneak in. "I suggest you move along before we have to involve law enforcement." Linda had sniffed. Ellie, bless her restraint, simply said, "You're standing on our land right now. Maybe you should leave." Linda didn't like that. Not one bit. The next morning, Ellie woke up to find a handwritten violation notice duct taped to the cabin's front door. Some nonsense about unauthorized parking, trespassing, and using HOA-maintained facilities without permission. Ellie sent me a picture of it with a single text. "Is this woman serious?" Oh, she was serious, but not very smart. See, while Ellie's patience runs deep, it isn't bottomless. Over the next week, this HOA Karen escalated from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. First, she tried blocking the access road with orange cones. Ellie moved them. Then she started sending HOA security, if you can even call 2 retirees in reflective vest security, to loiter at the property line, pretending to take notes. Ellie waved every time they showed up. But the kicker? That came on a humid Friday afternoon. Ellie was down by the dock scrubbing algae off the ladder when a sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the cabin. Lights on. No siren. Just enough to make a scene. Out stepped a deputy who, from the look on his face, already regretted whatever call had sent him out here. "Ma'am," he said, polite but firm, "we receive a report of trespassing and possible vandalism on HOA property." Ellie didn't even blink. "This is our property. Do you have proof of that on you?" "Yeah," she said, climbing up from the water. "In the cabin. Want to see the deed." Turns out Linda had marched her clipboard right into the sheriff's office claiming some unknown woman had been squatting on community-maintained land. Never mind that the tax records, boundary maps, and, the literal fence line said otherwise. Linda assumed, as Karen so often do, that loud confidence beat facts. The deputy followed Ellie inside. She showed him not just a deed, but the county map, the tax receipts, and the permits, all neatly organized in a binder labeled, "For when idiots challenge me." My girl doesn't mess around. The deputy chuckled. "I'm real sorry, ma'am. Looks like this one's a waste of everyone's time." He radioed back to dispatch, made a note on his tablet, and shook Ellie's hand on the way out. Linda, who'd been watching from her golf cart at the end of the lane, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. You'd think that would have been the end of it, but with HOA Karens, logic only fuels their delusion. That weekend, Ellie spotted fresh tire tracks near the boathouse, a drone buzzing overhead while she was sunbathing, and, most petty of all, a pile of HOA newsletters stuffed into her mailbox with notes scribbled in red pen. Guests only, not residents. That's when she called me again, not in frustration this time, in strategy mode. "Dad," she said, "I think it's time we remind this woman exactly who owns this land. Publicly." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're thinking what I'm thinking?" "Oh, yeah," Ellie said. "We're doing this the old-fashioned way." The plan she proposed? Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just a kind of slow, ironclad humiliation that HOA types can't argue with, because it's all documented, lawful, and devastatingly public. See, what Linda didn't know is that our family didn't just own the cabin. We owned half the lakefront easement she kept claiming authority over. The dock, the gravel road, even the spot where her precious community beach sign leaned, technically, legally, county-mapped ours. And Ellie was about to make sure everyone knew it. Ellie wasn't the kind of person to stew in anger. She was tactical, strategic. The Navy may not have been her career path like it was mine, but living under my roof for 20-some years had taught her the value of precision revenge over pointless outrage. And this time, she was thinking several moves ahead. Her first step? Visibility. HOA Karens thrive in whispers and assumption, in people not knowing the truth. So Ellie decided to put the truth on a 6-foot sign. That Saturday, she drove to the local sign shop and ordered a custom-made wooden marker. Bold, tasteful, unmistakable. It read, "Private property. Owned since 1976. No HOA jurisdiction. No exceptions. Deed #457A, county registered." She posted it right where the gravel path met the water line, the exact spot Linda's HOA newsletters claimed as community beach access. Not a toe over the property line. Not a letter of the county map out of place. Just loud, lawful clarity. Naturally, Linda lost her mind. Monday morning, Ellie woke up to find 2 uniformed HOA enforcers. You can call 2 sunburnt men in cheap polos and clipboards enforcers, standing at the edge of the sign, snapping pictures and making phone calls. One of them even had the audacity to ask Ellie, "Do you have authorization to post signage here?" Ellie just smiled. "I own it. That's all the authorization I need." They didn't like that answer. Not one bit. By lunchtime, Linda herself had shown up, this time not in her golf cart, but in her husband's SUV, like she was gearing up for war. She marched right up to Ellie's deck, waved a wrinkled pamphlet in her face, and declared, "You are in direct violation of HOA guidelines regarding unsanctioned structures and signage." Ellie, bless her patience, didn't even flinch. "Linda, this is not HOA land. This is privately owned, county-registered property. This sign? Completely legal." Linda's lips pursed so tight, they practically disappeared. "We'll see about that." "Oh, I'm sure you will," Ellie said, stepping back inside with a calmness that only made Linda redder. Within 24 hours, Ellie received a certified letter from the HOA's legal department, which, upon inspection, turned out to be nothing more than Linda's cousin with a law degree and a Gmail address. The letter demanded she cease and desist trespassing and unauthorized development on HOA lands, citing bylaws that, surprise, didn't apply to her property whatsoever. Ellie didn't reply with threats. She replied with documents, copies of the deed, county land surveys, Even a notarized affidavit from the prior owners confirming the property boundaries back to the 70s. She CC'd the sheriff's department and the county clerk for good measure. And then she waited. Sure enough, Linda doubled down. HOA letters escalated into threats of fines, threats of legal action, empty words designed to intimidate, until Linda made a fatal mistake. She called code enforcement. And when that didn't work, she called the county assessor's office, claiming Ellie was building unauthorized structures on protected HOA wetland. Now, you need to understand, that's not just petty. That's expensive. If code enforcement finds violations, it can trigger fines, inspections, even force removals. Linda thought she could tie Ellie up in red tape until she gave up and left. What Linda didn't count on. Ellie had already anticipated this. When the county official arrived, Ellie was ready. Permit copies, land maps, historic site approvals, all laid out in a tidy folder marked for when bureaucrats appear. The inspector took one look at the documents, one look at Linda fuming in the background, and said, "Ma'am, this property's clean. Looks like you're wasting everyone's time." Linda didn't take that well. In fact, she tried to argue with the inspector right there on the gravel drive, raised her voice, cited fictional laws, even waved her HOA badge like it meant something outside her little cul-de-sac kingdom. The inspector finally turned, pointed at Ellie, and said, loud enough for Linda and half the shoreline to hear, "This woman owns this land free and clear. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here." Ellie? She just smiled and waved. But here's where things turn truly vindictive. Karen energy doesn't burn out. It escalates. Later that week, Ellie noticed something off. Her dock gate, usually chained shut, was unlatched. A few of her dock lights had been unscrewed. Minor things, sure, but deliberate. Then came the footprints. Fresh print on a sandbar where no one but her had walked in weeks. Supplies missing from her boathouse. Nothing huge. Not theft. Not vandalism in the legal sense. But intimidation. Presence. A message. We're watching. That's when Ellie called me again. Not upset. Not scared. Just resolute. "Dad," she said, "these people think they're clever. They think this is just between me and them. But they're about to learn it's a whole lot bigger." I knew that tone. It meant the plan was moving from defense to offense. Ellie's next step? Documentation. Cameras. Trail cams hidden in the trees. Motion sensors by the dock. Not just for security, but for proof. Proof that the HOA wasn't just harassing with letters and code enforcement. They were trespassing, tampering, pushing legal boundaries. And in this state, that's a big mistake. The footage didn't take long to collect. 3 nights later, Ellie sent me clips that could have gone viral all on their own. Linda, on foot, in the dark, walking the dock with a flashlight, clipboard in hand, jotting notes as if she were patrolling a mall parking lot. Another night, 2 of her HOA cronies, same retirees who'd been snapping photos earlier, standing on the property line whispering about how it's only a matter of time before she cracks. They weren't careful. They didn't think anyone was watching. Ellie watched, recorded, archived, and then she made her move. Armed with dates, footage, and every document under the sun, Ellie walked herself into the county courthouse, filed a formal harassment complaint, filed trespassing charges, attached the evidence, sent copies to the sheriff, copies to the HOA board's official address, even CC'd the local news, because nothing makes an HOA squirm like public scrutiny. The best part? The HOA's own bylaws, in the tiny print Linda probably hadn't read in years, explicitly forbid board members from entering any private property without written consent or emergency cause. Violation? Immediate removal from office. By Friday, the rumors started flying. Linda's position was under review. The HOA board was investigating potential misconduct. Members were whispering about legal exposure and personal liability. And Ellie? Ellie was already planning her next step. A public, undeniable declaration of ownership, so loud and clear no HOA Karen could ever mistake it again. Because when you escalate against a woman with both the deed and the patience to see it through, you don't win. You burn yourself down. Retaliation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow, methodical, and wrapped in paperwork so tight that the person you're targeting doesn't even realize they've lost until it's far too late. Ellie understood that perfectly. After filing her harassment and trespassing complaints, she didn't sit back and wait. No, she went on offense, not with arguments, but with undeniable legal proof and cold strategy. Every HOA board thinks they're untouchable until someone pulls the right levers. Ellie knew exactly which ones to press. First, she gathered every piece of evidence into a formal portfolio, something she could hand to anyone from law enforcement to local media if this mess dragged on any longer. Photos, security footage, timestamps, written harassment complaints from other cabin owners. Yes, Linda had been bothering them too, and the full history of property lines and ownership going back decades. Everything neat, organized, bulletproof. Then she turned to the one thing HOA Karens hate most: public scrutiny. Ellie reached out to the county commissioner's office, not just to reinforce her property rights, but to file an official grievance against Linda's HOA for abuse of process. See, small-town bureaucrats don't like their resources wasted on neighborly drama. Code enforcement, sheriff's time, county mapping offices, that costs taxpayer money. Ellie's case made it clear Linda was wasting it in spades. And Ellie made sure the grievance was copied by certified mail to every member of the HOA board. Within a week, the HOA board called a close emergency meeting. Word got out fast. Some members started whispering about liability exposure. Others realized their own properties bordered Ellie's land and didn't want to get dragged into lawsuits over Linda's crusade. HOA power crumbles fast when legal risk appears on the horizon. But Ellie didn't stop there. She went after their money. HOAs run on budgets, dues, and insurance. Ellie contacted their insurer with a formal letter of intent. If any further harassment or trespassing occurred, she'd hold them financially liable for all damages, legal fees, and any future security measures required to protect her property. Attached, a copy of her harassment complaint, footage of Linda's nighttime inspections, and legal citations spelling out how their bylaws have been violated. Insurance companies hate risk, hate lawsuits even more. That's when the HOA board really started sweating. And then Ellie delivered her masterpiece. The county held quarterly public forums for landowners, often sparsely attended. But this time, Ellie made sure everyone showed up. Flyers posted at the gas station, on community boards, and in neighboring marinas. Do you own lakefront property? Know your rights. Know your neighbors. Know your boundaries. Guest speaker, Ellie Harper, legal owner of Parcel 47, registered since 1976. It wasn't just bold. It was genius. She turned a personal feud into a public seminar on property rights, a move that didn't just humiliate Linda. It exposed how shaky her entire HOA's claims had been from the start. The meeting was packed. Local fishermen, retired couples, seasonal cabin owners, even a few curious locals who'd heard whispers about that HOA woman getting sued. Ellie stood at the front of the room, calm, prepared, flipping through slides like a pro. County maps showing precise property lines, tax records from the 70s, legal definitions of HOA boundaries versus private easements. The footage of Linda creeping onto her dock in the dead of night. The room buzzed, heads shook, murmurs spread when she showed the cease and desist letter from the county, confirming her ownership and Linda's violations. A small cheer even broke out. Sitting in the back row, slouched so low she barely cleared the seat back, was Linda herself, face flushed, jaw clenched, arms folded so tight they looked glued together. For once, she had nothing to say. Ellie ended with a simple statement. Know your land, respect your neighbors, and don't let titles like HOA president make you forget where the law actually stands. The applause wasn't thunderous. This was a room of retirees, not rock concert fans, but it was firm, supportive, final. News travels fast in small communities, especially when the sheriff's cousin runs a bait shop and the county clerk's brother runs a marina. By Monday, Linda's HOA wasn't just on defensive, they were in retreat. The board called a vote to remove Linda from her post pending investigation, Fines? Dropped. Letters? Retracted. Enforcement? Suspended. Until jurisdiction is clarified. HOA members started avoiding her at the grocery store, whispering about lawsuits, wondering how they'd let this spiral so far. But Ellie wasn't done. One final chess move remained. She filed paperwork to officially rename her easement, not the property itself, but the private road leading to it, which HOA members often confuse as part of their access route. Her chosen name? Karen's Folly. Approved. Installed on a crisp new street sign by the county themselves. Visible from Linda's backyard. Retaliation complete. What started as petty notices and intimidation had ended with Linda publicly disgraced, legally neutered, and left explaining to her HOA why their dues had just been raised to cover new liability insurance costs. Ellie's property? Untouched, unbothered, clearly marked and fully protected. And all of it done without raising her voice or breaking a single law. Revenge doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes, the best revenge is watching your enemy unravel under the weight of their own arrogance. Publicly, unmistakably, and without a single raised voice. That's exactly what Ellie was about to deliver. After her public presentation, humiliated Linda and exposed the HOA's lies. Ellie knew Linda's days as a self-appointed queen of the neighborhood were numbered. But Ellie wasn't content with just watching her squirm. She wanted finality, closure, proof that this woman would never harass another neighbor again. Her plan? Force Linda to expose herself one last time, on record. Ellie filed for a formal injunction against Linda and the HOA. Not because she expected a courtroom showdown, but because a hearing meant witnesses, transcripts, and, most importantly, a public record. She wanted Linda's behavior documented where no HOA rewrite could erase it. And when the court date landed, Ellie sent polite notices to every neighbor who'd been harassed over the years. Feel free to attend. It's open to the public. Meanwhile, Linda was unraveling fast, her authority crumbling, her board turning on her, and her reputation shredded by Ellie's methodical takedown. She grew reckless. More notes stuffed in Ellie's mailbox. Passive-aggressive comments lobbed at passing neighbors. At one point, she even tried to file a restraining order against Ellie. Laughable, given the amount of evidence showing Linda was the one doing the stalking. But it was a court hearing where everything truly collapsed. On the morning of the hearing, Ellie arrived composed and prepared, dressed with quiet authority in navy slacks and a pressed blazer. By her side, her attorney, a sharp, unflappable professional who knew exactly how to handle small-town courtroom theatrics. Across the aisle sat Linda, flushed, fidgety, no attorney, just a pile of poorly stapled documents and a binder labeled HOA policies, as if waiving rules in front of a judge would magically overwrite county deeds. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who clearly had little patience for neighborhood drama, reviewed the filings with thinly veiled annoyance. "Ms. Harper," she said to Ellie, "your documentation appears thorough and legal. This is your property, free and clear, as recognized by county and state records." "Correct. Yes, Your Honor. And you're seeking an injunction to prevent further harassment and trespassing by this individual and her associates." "That's correct." The judge turned to Linda. "Ms. Pritchard, do you dispute the property ownership in question?" Linda squirmed. "Well, the HOA guidelines clearly state." "I didn't ask about HOA guidelines, Ms. Pritchard. I asked if you dispute her legal ownership." Linda's mouth opened, closed, open again. "No, Your Honor." That was it. The moment of collapse. The admission on record. No jurisdiction. No authority. No more hiding behind neighborhood newsletters. Ellie's attorney leaned in, whispered something, and the judge nodded. "In light of the evidence, I am granting the injunction. Furthermore, I strongly advise the defendant to cease any further attempts to exert authority where none legally exists. Future violations may result in criminal charges." Linda's face? A portrait of public defeat. Her neighbors in the gallery? Whispering. Some smirking. One old gentleman even clapped before realizing where he was. Ellie walked out of that courtroom, not just victorious, but with legal proof public record, and the HOA president's defeat stamped into history. But she wasn't finished. With the injunction secured, Ellie moved to reinforce her ownership in ways Linda couldn't touch. Security upgrades, new gates with surveillance, motion sensors linked directly to local police dispatch, property markers, fresh, official county signage installed. No one could claim ignorance now. Public notice, an announcement in the local paper clarifying property lines, ownership, and the HOA's lack of authority. But the final blow? Community solidarity. Ellie organized a lakeside event, not a party, but a celebration of landowner rights. Invited the neighbors, hosted speakers from the county, even a representative from the state property board, free refreshments, open Q&A, every topic geared toward understanding property law and avoiding exactly the kind of harassment Linda had dished out for years. And who showed up? Nearly every HOA member, minus Linda. Photos circulated online. Ellie smiling with county officials, neighbors laughing together, kids playing by the very dock Linda had tried to patrol as her own. One image stood out. Ellie beside her newly installed Karen's Folly street sign, posed with the sheriff and holding a cup of lemonade like she'd just finished a summer project. Linda? Silent. Defeated. Already whispers said she was facing pressure to move. Listing her house quietly. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. But Ellie had one last piece of poetic justice. She compiled her journey into a presentation for the HOA board's annual meeting. Not out of spite, but as a teaching moment. Slideshows, documentation, how not to overstep your authority, a cautionary tale. The room sat in embarrassed silence as Ellie outlined every misstep, from fake citations to unlawful trespass, ending with a simple conclusion: respect boundaries, or you'll be the next cautionary tale on someone's slideshow. The board members nodded, apologetic. Policies were reviewed. Leadership was shuffled. A new HOA president was elected. Someone reasonable, someone who shook Ellie's hand and thanked her for clarifying the difference between community guidelines and the law. Revenge? Achieved. But more importantly, protection, precedent, peace. Linda's reign ended not in fire, but in humiliation and legal defeat. Ellie's property stood untouched. Her reputation? Cemented as the woman who didn't just stand up to Karen. She rewrote the playbook on how to dismantle suburban tyranny. Step by patient, calculated step. And every time Ellie walked past the Karen's Folly sign, she smiled. Neighborhoods forget fast, but small towns never do. Linda Pritchard learned that the hard way. In the months following Ellie's complete and total victory, the HOA went through what polite people called a transition period. What that really meant: a quiet bloodletting of the old guard, one by one. Board members stepped down, citing personal reasons. Longtime allies of Linda stopped showing up to meetings. Some sold their homes under the pretense of downsizing, though everyone knew the truth. No one wants to live under the shadow of public humiliation. Ellie didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The neighborhood did it for her. At block parties, people toasted to clear boundaries and even clearer deeds. At the marina, old-timers swapped stories about the HOA president who thought she could rewrite county records with nothing but a clipboard. And at the gas station bulletin board, the real social hub of any small town, someone had discreetly pinned a laminated copy of the court injunction right beneath the flyer for Saturday's pancake breakfast. Linda herself? Practically invisible. Her once daily patrols ceased entirely. The tan SUV with the magnetic HOA decals disappeared from her driveway. Rumor said she stopped renewing her HOA membership altogether, quietly resigning without so much as a farewell email. Neighbors noticed her lawn grew a little wild, her shutters a little crooked. The house that once screamed rules and order now looked like every other aging suburban relic, faded, forgotten, and increasingly up for sale. But Ellie's victory wasn't just about one woman's downfall. It was about restoring balance. Neighbors who'd once been too afraid to speak up now came forward with their own stories of petty harassment and intimidation. And because of Ellie's meticulous case, the HOA couldn't touch them. The new leadership, freshly aware of their limits, pivoted fast. Fewer fines, more transparency, actual votes on policy changes. Imagine that. The irony? Linda had spent years trying to control the neighborhood to maintain order. In the end, her obsession unraveled the very power she'd built. One moment summed it up perfectly. A few months later, Ellie received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Tight, precise, old-fashioned cursive that practically screamed former HOA president. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No apology, no explanation. Just a clipped newspaper article from the local rag. County approves new road sign. Karen's Folly, now official marker at Harper Lake Access. Beneath it, scribbled in pen, 5 words. Enjoy your little victory. Ellie laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just a genuine, belly-deep laugh. Because it wasn't a little victory. It was everything. Proof that she'd won. Proof that Linda was still seething from the sidelines, while Ellie lived free, unbothered and unafraid. But poetic justice wasn't done yet. Late that summer, Ellie's daughter, the one Linda had tried to intimidate with her ridiculous trespassing claims, came home on leave, still in uniform, still sharp as ever. The two of them took a quiet walk down to the lake, past the newly polished Karen's Folly sign, past the security cameras that now deterred even the nosiest HOA member from venturing too close. On the dock, Ellie handed her daughter a small box. Inside, the original deed to property, carefully preserved. One day, Ellie said, "This will all be yours, and no HOA on earth will ever tell you otherwise." Her daughter smiled. Good, because the next time someone calls the cops on me for standing on my own dock, they're going to need a better reason, and Karen didn't like it. They sat in silence, watching the sunset turn the water to molten gold, their reflection rippling peacefully, untouched, unchallenged, unafraid. In the end, Ellie hadn't just defended her land. She protected her family's legacy, her daughter, her neighbors, even the wider community, all reminded that laws matter more than loud mouths. Deeds matter more than decals. And bullies, no matter how entrenched, always fall when someone stands up and says, "No more." Some say Linda moved out the following spring. Her house sold at a loss. Others claim she still lurks on neighborhood Facebook groups under an alias, complaining about fence heights and leaf piles. Either way, her power's gone. Her reign is over. Karen's Folly stands as her memorial, not of what she built, but of how spectacularly she failed. Ellie's story spread, quietly at first, a cautionary tale shared over coffee at town halls, across marinas, and HOA meetings far beyond their little corner of the world. Eventually, it became more than that. It became inspiration, a reminder to anyone facing down their own Karen that patience, evidence, and the law can win where shouting never will. And if you drive past that lake today, you'll still see the sign, bright, bold, unmissable, Karen's Folly. A warning to busybodies everywhere, and a promise to everyone else. Stand your ground. Own your truth. Never let them steal what's rightfully yours.